let me just say I travel around the country. I was in Atlanta a day and a half ago. I go all over the country talking about, meeting with people about what we're up to. And throughout our country these days, there is so much resignation and despair and lack of possibility around the economy. People just, where are the jobs? What are we going to do? So I just want to say personally, I find it heartwarming to be in the space of so many people with such great energy, so much vision, and doing such terrific things. So thank you. And Mellisa, thank you very much for the introduction, and she said very nice things about Evergreen, but let me also say we're at very early days, so in some ways it's quite humbling to be up here speaking to you, because we have a tremendous amount to learn from you all. Many of you have been in this for decades. We're kind of the new kids on the block. This whole effort's only been going on for 3 or 4 years. And it's not just our effort. We couldn't have made it this far without our colleagues in Mondragon. Every year we take a trip to the Basque country. We're going back in September. We bring people from Mondragon to Ohio to help us sort things out. We're very lucky that in Ohio we have the Ohio Employee Ownership Center. And because of that, Ohio has more employee owners per capita and more employee-owned companies per capita than any state in the union. And we've also been assisted by Mellisa and her colleagues at the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, particularly in this most immediate phase as we've been sorting out structural and legal and really nitty-gritty details. So this is an effort of many people that Medrick and I have the opportunity to represent to you today. Let me just set the stage and with some introductory comments. Then we're going to show you part of a PowerPoint. We're going to show you about a 5-minute video that was made about Evergreen. Medrick is going to speak from the perspective of a worker owner, and he's asked me to ask him some questions that we worked out right before this, so he hasn't been thinking about them forever. Right before we got on, we said, what about this question, that? So it's going to be very free flow. And then because I know a lot of you, because you really are developing co-ops and working in co-ops, I want to go through just a little bit of the structural issues before we open it up. So it's a lot to do. And by way of framing this, let me say, the Evergreen Cooperative Initiative that you see behind me is part of a broader economic development and community building strategy that's taking place in Cleveland, Ohio. So our intent is not to just build co-ops, not to just create living wage or better jobs with decent benefits and the profits allocated to the workers that own the company. Ours is to revitalize and stabilize and transform a very large part of Cleveland, Ohio. So it's a place-based economic development strategy that leverages some of the most powerful economic actors in our city that I'll describe, and leverages them for the benefit of the people of the neighborhoods surrounding these institutions, which have historically been, they've not been able to participate in the economic growth in the city. So it's a comprehensive economic development strategy. It also seeks to address a set of questions that are plaguing Cleveland, issues and challenges that are in the face of Cleveland, Ohio, but in many other cities. Certainly being faced by Rust Belt or older industrial cities like Pittsburgh and Detroit and Cleveland and Buffalo and many others, but also are questions faced by high growth, strong market cities like many of yours may be. And so the questions that we're trying to deal with and respond to through this initiative are the following 6. First, how do we create good quality jobs in this country at a time of growing job dislocation and disinvestment in our urban areas? Second, how do we anchor capital, particularly in underserved, disinvested, low-income neighborhoods, so that it doesn't get up and leave, as so many corporations have that have outsourced jobs out of the country? Third, where do we find financing for job creation at a time of ever more constrained resources for economic development? Fourth, how do we address the lack of economic opportunity that is endemic in many of our urban neighborhoods and rural areas, where unemployment is at double-digit levels even in the best of times, and where as many as 30 to 50% of residents today may live below the poverty line. Fifth, how do we turn the vision and promise of green jobs in the green economy into real employment opportunities that are available to our workers today, not as some far-off promise that people are being trained for, but they may not have jobs once the training is done. And finally, and most important of all, how do we rebuild the economies of our cities in order to stabilize and revitalize our disinvested neighborhoods? So those are the questions that have led us to develop the Evergreen Cooperative Initiative. So let me, it's a little awkward because I'm 6'5". This is down here. So I'm going to try this with a mouse that I hold because I don't have a clicker. All right, so Evergreen. So here we go. Let's try it. So this is about something taking place in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, many of you have probably a particular view of Cleveland, right? Right. And Cleveland has suffered through some very, very hard times. In the 1950s, Cleveland was the 5th largest city in the country. Now, there weren't like cities very much like Phoenix in those days. They were little, hole-in-the-wall places. Now they're much larger. In the 1950s, there were more Fortune 500 corporations headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio, than any other city in the United States outside of New York City. Today, there's one left. There were about 915,000 people. When the new census numbers are added up, there'll be just a little north of 400,000. So there's been a tremendous flight of jobs and capital and residents. And yet it's really a quite extraordinary city. What we're trying to do, as I said, is revive the economy of this city and rebuild it. Not just for Cleveland, but in a way that hopefully we can learn something for the rest of the country. So the Evergreen Initiative has 3 major goals. First, to create jobs, and I told you very large unemployment in the area we're looking at. Second, to generate wealth. And by that we mean, we don't think when you're dealing with neighborhoods like where we're recruiting our workforce from. These are neighborhoods, as you'll see, that have a median household income below $18,500, 43,000 residents. We don't think a job, even a decent job that's a 12-hour, 15-hour, 16-hour job, that is going to provide enough resources in an asset-poor situation like this so their family can really get ahead. So we have to enable workers participating in Evergreen to build wealth. And the way we see doing that is through equity ownership in their company, through the worker cooperative form. And third, as I said, the long-term goal is to stabilize the neighborhoods. If we provide jobs for 500 people or 5,000 people, if it doesn't lead to the transformation of the neighborhoods into places of choice and where people really want to live and can flourish, then the experiment is not a success in our view. Let me just show you, in Cleveland, one of the things, while the companies have left in the main, one of the things that's left behind are a large number of what are called anchor institutions, big hospitals, universities, art museums, the symphony, and the like. And they are really the economic engine of the city. They are the largest employers in Northeast Ohio. They purchase billions of dollars of goods and services, and these are some of the recent expansions of these big institutions. Those institutions are in that blue circle there. That's called University Circle. Surrounding that are 6 neighborhoods that you can see there, and that's roughly the footprint of our project, inside of which 43,000 people live, surrounding those institutions. Now, if you look at the neighborhoods, those 6 neighborhoods, this is a picture you see. And let me say, these maps you're going to see are based on data from 4 or 5 years ago. So they don't take into account the recent foreclosure crisis and the recession. So all the little green dots, that is vacant property, again, surrounding the core of the large anchor institutions. That's vacant property, and by vacant, I don't mean parkland. I mean property on which there are houses, manufacturing, businesses, and so forth 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now it's vacant, some of it's owned privately, most of it's in the city's land banks. So there's a lot of open space. All these little red, pink salmon dots show poor and unsound building conditions. Places where houses are dilapidated and people don't have the resources to fix them up. All of these little black and blue and red dots, those really signal the coming foreclosure crisis. Water's been shut off, there are foreclosures, tax delinquency. Again, but look in this circle where the big institutions are. You see very little of that. So if you put that all together, this is the picture you get. That's what life is like for 43,000 people in Cleveland surrounding these institutions. One thing I should say, those institutions, just 3 of the big ones, 2 hospitals and Case Western Reserve University, annually purchase $3 billion of goods and services every year. And that doesn't include their personnel budgets. They employ about 50,000 people. It doesn't include their construction budgets. That's $3 billion, and virtually none of it makes it into the local neighborhoods. So thus our strategy. One, we work with the large institutions who historically have not, and frankly, been very connected to the community. And it's a story all over the country. Institutions don't talk the same language as residents. There's lots of suspicion. Institutions need property for parking lots. Residents feel their neighborhoods are being encroached upon. On the institution's part, they feel like they're always being criticized, they can never do anything wrong. So there's a whole history that goes on there, and I don't want to say who's right or who's wrong, there's a history. But what's started to happen is these kinds of institutions all over the country are beginning to realize that their fate, and indeed their business model, is inextricably bound up with the fate of their communities. Because if you think about it, if you're a doctor and you're being recruited by one institution, and that institution's in a vibrant, healthy city and safe neighborhoods, and you can live near work, or you are recruited by another institution where the neighborhood looks unsafe, it's disinvested, you don't feel welcome, there are no grocery stores. Of course, this is a whole food desert situation we have. You might well tend to go for the hospital that has the better surrounding. Same with students. Parents don't want to take their kids to schools in urban areas if they think their kids are going to be unsafe. So as part of a proposition of what's best for your institution, our argument has been revitalizing and contributing to the local neighborhoods is going to make a difference to your institution, that it could really be a win-win situation. So we're working with the institutions to identify local purchasing opportunities that could be sourced locally of the $3 billion. Second, there are very few businesses in the neighborhoods that are capable of working with the Cleveland Clinic or university hospitals. There are more mom and pop shops, car repair places, fast food places. So we had to get into business development as a strategy. And rather than just back entrepreneurs or try to induce corporations and big box stores to come in to bring jobs that usually aren't very good, aren't very high wages, not very good benefits, we decided to begin developing a network of businesses that we call Evergreen. And Medrick is a leader, a manager of one of those businesses, and we'll be showing you what they are. Third, we want to make everything as green as possible. And by that we mean each business, our proposition, as a business proposition to the institutions is this, that if you do business with Medrick's Evergreen Cooperative Laundry, it will be the greenest commercial scale laundry in the entire Northeast Ohio laundry sector. You can't do business with a greener laundry than Evergreen.